Hell's Angels saves wounded. Female cop, next day, 200 cops show up to thank the hero. The setting sun painted long shadows across the downtown streets as Jenna Walker guided her patrol car through the familiar routes of her beat. The orange glow of dusk reflected off storefront windows, creating a deceptively peaceful atmosphere. Her partner, Mike Torres, sat quietly beside her, filling out paperwork from their last call. Jenna's fingers drummed absently on the steering wheel as her thoughts drifted to the letter sitting in her locker back at the station. The promotion to detective had finally come through, but instead of feeling excited, she felt a strange heaviness in her chest. The new position would mean leaving patrol work behind, leaving Mike behind. "You're awful quiet today," Mike said, glancing up from his clipboard. His dark eyes held a hint of concern. "Still thinking about that promotion?" Jenna managed a small smile. "That obvious, huh?" "Only to someone who's been riding with you for 3 years. Mike set his paperwork aside. "You deserve it, Jenna. Don't second-guess yourself." The familiar streets seemed different today, as if they were already saying goodbye. They passed Mrs. Chen's flower shop, where the elderly woman was bringing in her display of bright yellow sunflowers. The regulars at Joe's coffee shop waved through the window. They'd been keeping this neighborhood safe for so long. It felt like family. "I just don't know if I'm ready for a desk job," Jenna admitted, turning onto Madison Avenue. The evening traffic was starting to pick up as people headed home from work. "Out here, we make a real difference. We know these people, their stories, their struggles." A group of kids played basketball in the community center's court, their laughter carrying across the street. Jenna remembered breaking up fights there in her early days, but now the center was a symbol of positive change in the neighborhood. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today." Now back to the story. "Being a detective doesn't mean you stop making a difference," Mike replied. "It just means you'll be helping people in a different way." The radio crackled with routine updates, and Jenna found comfort in its familiar static. She was about to respond to Mike when something caught her eye. A flash of movement in an alley up ahead. "Did you see that?" she asked, slowing the patrol car. Before Mike could answer, the peaceful evening erupted into chaos. The first shot rang out like a crack of thunder, shattering the passenger window. Mike jerked forward with a cry of pain, and Jenna's training kicked in instantly. "Officer down! Shots fired at Madison and 5th!" she shouted into her radio, reaching for her weapon. More shots peppered the air around them, and she could hear screams as pedestrians ran for cover. Jenna threw open her door, using it as shield. Mike, talk to me!" she called out, but her partner only groaned in response. The world seemed to move in slow motion. She caught glimpses of figures moving between the buildings, but the setting sun cast deep shadows that made it impossible to get a clear view. Her heart pounded in her ears as she tried to locate the shooters. Another burst of gunfire erupted, and Jenna felt something strike her hard in the side. The impact knocked her off balance, and as she stumbled, her head connected with the edge of the car door. The last thing she saw was the orange sky spinning above her as she crumpled to the ground. The sounds around her began to fade, running footsteps, distant sirens, frightened voices of onlookers. Her vision darkened at the edges, and then everything went black as consciousness slipped away from her grasp. The gunshots echoed off brick buildings as people scattered in panic. Jenna Walker lay motionless on the sidewalk, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead where she'd struck the pavement. Her service weapon had skittered away, coming to rest near a newspaper stand. The chaos of screaming civilians and squealing tires filled the air. Across the street, Reggie Big Red Jackson's head snapped up at the sound of gunfire. His massive frame, clad in worn jeans and a leather vest bearing the Hell's Angels patch, tensed as his combat-trained instincts kicked in. Through the sea of fleeing bodies, he spotted the fallen officer. The sight triggered memories of his time in combat, of brothers and sisters in arms who needed help. Without hesitation, he broke into a run, his heavy boots pounding against the concrete. His red beard and long hair, tied back in a neat ponytail, caught the dying sunlight as he moved. People jumped out of his way, some letting out startled gasps at the sight of his tattoo-covered arms and intimidating presence. Reggie ignored them all, his focus laser-sharp on the unconscious officer. His dog tags jingled beneath his shirt as he ran, a reminder of another life, another time when he'd served a different kind of brotherhood. Reaching Jenna's side, Reggie dropped to one knee. His large hands, marked with tattoos that told stories of his past, moved with surprising gentleness as he checked her pulse. It was strong and steady. His trained eye quickly assessed her injuries. The head wound didn't look too deep, but unconsciousness was never a good sign. "Ma'am? Officer? Can you hear me?" His deep voice carried a note of genuine concern. When she didn't respond, Reggie carefully supported her neck and checked for any signs of spinal injury. Finding none, he made his decision. Sirens wailed in the distance, but Reggie knew from experience that waiting could mean the difference between life and death. The shooters might come back, and an unconscious officer made an easy target. With careful movements that belied his imposing size, he slipped one arm under her knees and the other behind her shoulders. Reggie lifted Jenna as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, dark hair falling across her pale face. He could feel the badge on her uniform pressing against his leather vest, a strange symbol of their worlds colliding. "Hey, stop right there!" A shrill voice cut through the chaos. A woman in a business suit pointed an accusing finger at Reggie. "He's a hellsangel! He's the enemy!" The woman's words hung in the air, drawing fearful looks from the remaining bystanders. But Reggie didn't even turn his head. His jaw set in determination as he strode forward, each step purposeful and sure. The unconscious officer in his arms needed help, and that was all that mattered. The judgment of others meant nothing compared to doing what was right. Through the chaotic streets of downtown, Reggie carried Jenna's unconscious form with careful determination. His muscular arms cradled her protectively against his chest as distant sirens wailed and people continued to scatter in fear. The setting sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the air felt thick with tension. The leather of his vest creaked as he moved swiftly but steadily, taking back alleys and lesser-known routes. He knew these streets well, every shortcut, every hidden passage. Behind them, shouts and the occasional pop of gunfire echoed off building walls, but Reggie kept his focus forward, his jaw set with purpose. 5 blocks later, he reached a weathered brick building tucked away on a quiet side street. Using his shoulder, he pushed open the heavy security door and carried Jenna up 2 flights of stairs. The stairwell was dim, lit only by weak fluorescent bulbs that flickered overhead. His apartment wasn't much, a small, tidy space with minimal furniture and clean, if worn, surfaces. The walls were bare except for a single framed military commendation and a few old photographs. A neat stack of books sat on the coffee table, alongside a half-empty coffee mug from that morning. Reggie gently laid Jenna on his navy blue couch, careful not to jostle her head. The cushions dipped under her weight as he arranged a throw pillow beneath her head. Blood had dried on her temple, matting some of her dark hair. Her breathing was steady, but her face was pale under the apartment's soft lighting. Moving with practiced efficiency, Reggie retrieved a first aid kit from under his bathroom sink. The large metal box was well stocked, a habit from his military days. He set it on the coffee table and pulled out gauze, antiseptic, and other supplies. His large hands, usually more suited to handling motorcycle parts or throwing punches, moved with surprising delicacy as he cleaned the wound on her forehead. The gash wasn't as bad as it had first appeared. Head wounds always bled more dramatically than their severity warranted. That was something he'd learned both in combat and on the streets. Still, she needed proper medical attention. The problem was, hospitals meant questions, and questions meant trouble. Right now, with whoever had been shooting still out there, trouble was the last thing either of them needed. As he finished applying a butterfly bandage to her forehead, Reggie noticed her beginning to stir. Her fingers twitched slightly, and her breathing pattern changed. He moved back, giving her space, knowing that a police officer waking up in a strange place would likely be on high alert. Jenna's eyelids fluttered, then opened slowly. She squinted against the light, confusion evident in her features. Her hand instinctively moved toward her empty holster as her eyes darted around the unfamiliar room, finally settling on Reggie's imposing figure. Despite her disorientation, her training kicked in, and wariness filled her expression. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and uncertain. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, held a sharp edge of suspicion as she took in his tattoos and Hell's Angels vest. Reggie raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe," he replied in his deep, steady voice. "That's all that matters right now. Try not to move too much. You took a nasty hit to the head." Jenna's eyes fluttered open, her vision slowly coming into focus. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, plain white with a simple light fixture. Her head throbbed, and every muscle in her body screamed in protest as she tried to move. The events from earlier crashed back into her memory. The gunfire, the chaos, her partner getting hit. She turned her head carefully, taking in her surroundings. The apartment was small but neat, with minimal decoration. A military commendation hung on one wall, its frame dusty but well-maintained. Through the window, she could see the sky had darkened to a deep purple. How long had she been out? At the kitchen table sat her unlikely savior, Reggie Big Red. Jackson's massive frame seemed almost too big for the wooden chair he occupied. His leather vest bore the unmistakable patches of the Hell's Angels, but his posture was alert, watchful, almost protective. His eyes never left her as she struggled to push herself up. "Easy there," Reggie's deep voice rumbled through the quiet room. "You took quite a hit." Pain shot through Jenna's ribs as she managed to sit upright. Her hand instinctively went to her hip. Her gun was gone. "Where's my weapon?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "On the counter." Reggie nodded toward the kitchen. Didn't think it'd be smart to leave an unconscious cop armed. Jenna's eyes narrowed. "Why did you bring me here? Why not the hospital?" "Hospitals ask questions," Reggie replied simply. "And right now, questions could get you killed." "I can take care of myself," Jenna insisted, even as another wave of pain made her wince. "I don't need help from a what?" Reggie interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "A criminal? A biker?" He stood up slowly, his height imposing, but his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He walked to the framed commendation on the wall and gestured toward it. "Before I wore this vest, I wore a different uniform. 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. 2 tours in Afghanistan." Jenna's eyes widened slightly as she read the citation. It was a Silver Star, one of the highest military honors for valor in combat. "You're a war hero," she said, her voice softer now. "Was," Reggie corrected. "Now I'm just a man who saw someone who needed help and did what needed to be done." He returned to his chair, his dark eyes meeting hers. "I've been out of the game for years. The patch, it's complicated, but it doesn't make me your enemy." Jenna shifted uncomfortably, both from physical pain and the realization that her assumptions about this man might have been wrong. "Still doesn't explain why you risked your neck for a cop. Most of your associates wouldn't have." "Maybe that's exactly why I did it," Reggie replied. "Because everyone expects us to be the bad guys. Sometimes doing the right thing means surprising people." A moment of silence passed between them. Jenna studied his face, seeing past the tough exterior for the first time. There was a steadiness in his gaze, a quiet dignity that didn't match the threatening image she'd always associated with his kind. "I appreciate what you did," she said finally, though her voice still carried a note of caution. "But I can handle things from here." The next few days passed in a blur of pain medication and fitful sleep. Jenna's ribs ached with every breath, but she couldn't deny that Reggie's apartment had become an unexpectedly safe haven. The small space felt almost cozy, with sunlight filtering through cream-colored curtains and the gentle hum of a box fan in the corner. Reggie moved through the apartment with surprising grace for such a large man. His tattooed arms were capable of both crushing strength and remarkable gentleness as he helped her from the couch to the bathroom, always keeping a respectful distance while ensuring she didn't fall. "You need to eat something," he said on the third morning, placing a bowl of steaming oatmeal on the coffee table. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar filled the air. "Can't heal on an empty stomach." Jenna watched him carefully as he worked in the kitchen. His movements were precise, methodical, like a soldier's. The military training was evident in everything he did, from the way he kept the apartment organized to how he checked the windows periodically. "Thank you," she said quietly, picking up the spoon. The oatmeal was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold. It reminded her of Sunday mornings at her grandmother's house. Throughout the day, Reggie brought her water, helped her walk around the apartment to prevent blood clots, and even found an old paperback novel for her to read. His kindness confused her. Everything she knew about the hellsangels clashed with the man who now stood before her, carefully changing the bandage on her forehead. That evening, as the sun painted the walls orange, Jenna finally gathered the courage to ask what had been on her mind. "Why did you join them? The angels?" She gestured to his vest, hanging by the door. "After serving in the military." Reggie sat in his usual chair, his expression thoughtful. "When I came back from my third tour," he began, his voice low and steady. "Everything was different. Couldn't sleep, couldn't relate to civilians. My wife left, took our daughter with her." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous gesture that seemed out of place on such a tough-looking man. "The angels. They understood. Most of them were vets too. They didn't ask questions when I woke up screaming. They had my back when I couldn't have my own." His eyes met hers, clear and honest. "It's not what people think. We're not just criminals. We look after our own, protect our community." "But the illegal activities," Jenna started. "Some do," he acknowledged. "I won't lie to you. But me, I run a veterans support group. Help guys who came back like I did. Give them somewhere to belong." He showed her a photo on his phone, Reggie surrounded by veterans, all smiling, some in wheelchairs, others standing proud. Jenna felt something shift inside her as she looked at the picture. The man before her wasn't the hardened criminal she'd expected. He was someone who'd been broken by war and found his way back through helping others. His leather vest and tattoos weren't marks of rebellion. They were armor for a wounded heart. "The world isn't black and white," Reggie said softly. "Sometimes good people wear badges, sometimes they wear leather, sometimes they wear both." Jenna's legs felt stronger today as she carefully made her way around Reggie's apartment. He had stepped out briefly to get groceries, giving her a chance to explore the small space more thoroughly. Her police instincts kicked in, though she felt a twinge of guilt about snooping through her rescuer's belongings. In the corner of the living room, partially hidden behind a stack of motorcycle magazines, she spotted a worn cardboard box. Curiosity got the better of her, and she carefully knelt down, wincing slightly at the protest from her bruised ribs. The box was dusty, as if it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, she found a collection of military photographs, their edges softened with age. Her breath caught as she picked up the first one. A younger Reggie stood tall and proud in his dress uniform, his face smooth and unburdened. No tattoos marked his skin, and his eyes held a different kind of strength, one born of purpose rather than survival. More photos revealed Reggie with his unit, arms thrown around his fellow soldiers' shoulders, all of them grinning under the desert sun. At the bottom of the box lay several medals, including a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, their ribbons slightly faded, but still dignified. That was a lifetime ago. Jenna startled at Reggie's voice. She hadn't heard him return. He stood in the doorway, grocery bags in his hands, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, moving to put the photos back. "I shouldn't have. It's okay." Reggie set the bags down and crossed the room, lowering himself to sit on the floor beside her. He picked up one of the photos. Him and 3 other soldiers standing in front of a helicopter. Thompson, Rodriguez, and Miller. he said softly, pointing to each face. Best men I ever knew. Jenna watched as his fingers traced the edges of the photograph. What happened? Miller didn't make it home. Reggie's voice was quiet but steady. Thompson and Rodriguez did, but he shook his head. War changes you. We all struggled. Civilian life felt impossible. No one understood what we'd been through. He picked up another photo, this one showing him receiving one of his medals. I was decorated, praised as a hero. But back home, I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't sleep. My marriage fell apart. Jenna listened intently as Reggie continued. The angels, they were different. Half of them were vets themselves. They didn't judge when I had bad days, didn't ask questions when I needed space. They gave me purpose again, a sense of belonging. He met her eyes. I know what people think about us, but that brotherhood, it saved my life. Looking at him now, Jenna saw past the tattoos and the leather vest. She saw the soldier in the photos, the man who had sacrificed so much for his country, who had lost his way and found a new path to survival. The lines between right and wrong, good and bad, began to blur in her mind. Some choices, she said softly, aren't as simple as they seem. Reggie nodded, a look of understanding passing between them. For the first time since waking up in his apartment, Jenna felt her walls beginning to crumble. The evening sun cast long shadows through the apartment windows as Jenna sat on Reggie's worn leather couch. Her bruises had faded from angry purple to softer yellows and greens. The pain in her ribs had dulled to a manageable ache. She watched as Reggie moved around his small kitchen, preparing 2 mugs of hot tea. You don't have to keep taking care of me, you know, she said, though her voice held no real protest. I'm feeling much better. Reggie glanced over his shoulder, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Force of habit, I guess. Back in the service, we always looked after our own. He carried the steaming mugs over, settling beside her on the couch. The cushions dipped under his weight, and Jenna found herself sliding slightly closer to him. Their shoulders nearly touched. The proximity sent a flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with her injuries. Thank you, she murmured, accepting the mug. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Jenna felt a spark of electricity shoot up her arm. She quickly looked down at her tea, watching the steam rise in delicate swirls. The silence between them felt different tonight, charged, meaningful. Over the past few days, their conversations had grown easier, more natural. They'd shared stories about their lives, his time in the service, her reasons for becoming a cop. But now, in this quiet moment, words seemed unnecessary. Reggie shifted slightly, and his arm pressed against hers. Neither of them moved away. Jenna could feel the solid warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It should have made her nervous, being so close to someone she barely knew, someone from a world so different from her own. Instead, she felt safe. She sneaked a glance at his profile. The tough exterior was still there, the tattoos, the beard, the weathered face. But she'd learned to see past it now. She saw the gentle way he tended to her wounds, the careful consideration in his eyes when she spoke, the protective instinct that seemed as natural to him as breathing. What are you thinking about? He asked softly, catching her gaze. How wrong I was about you, she admitted. When I first woke up here, I thought... You thought I was just another thug, he finished for her, but there was no bitterness in his voice. Just understanding. I'm sorry, she whispered. Reggie set his mug down on the coffee table and turned to face her fully. His eyes, usually so guarded, were open and warm. Don't be. Most people see what they expect to see. You took the time to look deeper. That's more than most would do. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet completely secure in his presence. It was a contradiction that should have confused her, but somehow it made perfect sense. Reggie reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. His large hand came to rest on the side of her face, thumb gently brushing her cheek. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. The kiss lasted only a moment, but it conveyed everything words couldn't express. Protection, understanding, trust. When he pulled back, Jenna didn't move away. She let her head rest against his shoulder, breathing in the leather and motor oil scent that had become oddly comforting. For the first time since the shooting, she felt completely, utterly safe. The harsh buzz of Jenna's phone shattered the peaceful moment. She reached for it, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at her healing ribs. Captain Miller's name flashed on the screen. Her stomach tightened as she answered. "Walker here," she said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "Where have you been?" Captain Miller's gruff voice came through clearly. "We've been trying to reach you for days. Your partner's in the hospital, and you've gone completely off the grid." Jenna closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. In the comfort of Reggie's apartment, she'd almost forgotten about the outside world. "I'm sorry, sir. I was injured in the shooting and needed time to recover." "Well, recovery time's over. We need you back at the station. Today." The captain's tone left no room for argument. "There's paperwork to file, and we need your statement about what happened." Reggie watched her from across the room, his broad shoulders tense. He could probably guess what the conversation was about from her expression. "Yes, sir. I'll be there as soon as I can." Jenna ended the call and let her hand drop to her lap. The phone felt heavy, like a weight pulling her back to reality. "Your captain?" Reggie asked quietly. She nodded, running a hand through her tangled hair. "I have to go back. They need my statement about the shooting, and there's paperwork." Her voice trailed off. "Are you sure you're ready?" Concern deepened the lines around his eyes. "Your ribs are still healing." "I don't have much choice." Jenna stood carefully, testing her balance. The room didn't spin anymore, which was an improvement. "I'm a cop. It's my job." She gathered her few belongings, her badge, her phone, her gun holster. Her uniform was still stained with blood, but she'd have to make do until she could get home to change. Reggie watched her preparations with a troubled expression. When she finished, he stepped closer, his presence filling the small space between them. "Let me at least drive you," he offered. Jenna shook her head. "I can't show up at the station with a Hell's Angel. You know that." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understanding passed between them. Their worlds weren't meant to mix, no matter what had happened in this apartment. "At least let me call you a cab," he insisted. Before she could protest, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her in a gentle hug. The gesture was careful, mindful of her injuries, but firm enough to make her feel protected. His leather vest creaked softly as he moved. "Be careful out there," he murmured, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "The streets aren't safe right now." Jenna found herself leaning into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and motor oil that clung to him. The thought of leaving this sanctuary, of returning to her regular life, filled her with an unexpected sadness. "I will," she promised, reluctantly pulling away. She picked up her things and moved toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. At the threshold, she paused, looking back at the apartment that had become her safe haven, at the man who had defied all her expectations. Her hand rested on the doorknob as she fought the urge to stay, to delay her return to duty just a little longer. But duty called, and she had no choice but to answer. The precinct buzzed with activity as Jenna walked through the familiar glass doors. Her steps were measured, careful not to aggravate her healing ribs. Officers looked up from their desks, some offering small waves, others quickly averting their eyes. "Walker!" Officer Sarah Chen hurried over, wrapping Jenna in a gentle hug. "We were so worried. Thank God you're okay." Before Jenna could respond, Detective Matthews passed by, his shoulder barely missing hers. "Heard you've been shacking up with a Hell's Angel," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. Jenna's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. News traveled fast in the department, and she knew her disappearance with Reggie would raise eyebrows. She made her way to her desk, noting how some of her colleagues whispered behind their hands. "Don't mind them," Sarah said, perching on the edge of Jenna's desk. "They're just jealous you got saved by a hot biker." "Sarah!" Jenna couldn't help but smile, though it faded as she opened her computer. The case files from the drug bust filled her screen. Pictures of evidence, witness statements, and surveillance photos. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as memories of the shooting flooded back. A shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she saw Tommy, one of their most reliable informants. His usual confident swagger was replaced by nervous energy. "Officer Walker," he said quietly, glancing around. "Got a minute?" Jenna led him to an empty interview room, noting how his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under his eyes. "What's wrong, Tommy?" "You shouldn't have come back so soon," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "The Alvarez cartel. They're not happy about the bust. Lost a lot of product, lot of money." He leaned closer. "They're asking questions about you, offering money for information about your routine, where you live." Jenna's stomach churned, but she kept her face neutral. "How reliable is this information?" "Very. My cousin works as a janitor in their front business. Overheard it himself." Tommy's eyes darted to the door. "Just watch your back, okay? These guys, they don't forget." After Tommy left, Jenna sat at her desk, mechanically going through paperwork while her mind raced. The threat wasn't unexpected. She'd made enough arrests to know how cartels operated. But knowing she was specifically targeted made her hands shake slightly as she signed her reports. By the end of her shift, the sun had set, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Jenna walked to her car, keys gripped tightly between her fingers, scanning the darkness out of habit. The lot was nearly empty, just a few patrol cars and personal vehicles scattered about. Inside her car, Jenna let out a long breath. The warning echoed in her mind, making the shadows seem deeper, more threatening. She reached for the ignition but paused, her hand trembling slightly. The deep rumble of a motorcycle cut through her thoughts. Through her side mirror, she caught a glimpse of a familiar leather vest, broad shoulders, and red hair as Reggie rode past the lot. He didn't slow down or look her way, but she knew it wasn't a coincidence. Warmth spread through her chest, replacing the cold fear that had gripped her since Tommy's warning. Reggie was out there, watching over her. She wasn't alone in this. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Jenna walked toward her car. Her boots clicked against the pavement, echoing off the brick walls of nearby buildings. She fumbled with her keys, still sore from her injuries, when movement caught her eye. Two men in expensive dark suits appeared from behind a nearby van. Their polished shoes gleamed as they approached, and Jenna's hand instinctively moved toward her holster. The taller one she recognized immediately, Marco Alvarez, the cartel lieutenant she'd been tracking before the shootout. "Officer Walker," Marco said, his accent thick and measured. "What a pleasure to see you've recovered." His smile didn't reach his eyes, which remained cold and calculating. Jenna squared her shoulders, ignoring the twinge of pain in her side. "This is police property. You're not welcome here." The second man, shorter but broader, moved to circle behind her. Jenna shifted her stance to keep both men in view, her heart pounding against her ribs. "We came to deliver a friendly message," Marco continued, straightening his silk tie. "Your interference in our business has become problematic. The recent unpleasantness could have been avoided if you had simply looked the other way." "Is that what you call shooting at police officers? Unpleasantness?" Jenna's voice was steady, despite the fear churning in her stomach. "I've got news for you. I'm not backing down." Marco's smile faded. "Perhaps you misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation." He stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming. "Next time we won't miss. And your new friend, the biker, he can't protect you forever." Jenna's fingers curled into fists. "Is that a threat, Marco?" "Consider it a professional courtesy." He adjusted his cuffs, the gold links catching the sunlight. "Stay away from our operations. or there will be consequences. Not just for you, but for everyone you care about. Here's my professional courtesy, Jenna said, taking a step forward. I've got your faces, your names, and enough evidence to put you away for a long time. You come near me or anyone I care about, and I'll make it my life's mission to destroy everything you've built. The shorter man muttered something in Spanish, but Marco held up his hand, silencing him. His eyes narrowed, studying Jenna's face. You're either very brave or very stupid, Officer Walker. He straightened his jacket. Time will tell which. They turned and walked away, their expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. Jenna remained frozen, her heart racing, until they disappeared around the corner of the building. A deep rumble of a motorcycle engine broke the silence. Jenna turned to see Reggie emerging from behind a delivery truck, his massive frame casting a long shadow. His face was hard, jaw clenched, and his eyes tracked the direction the men had gone. Heat rushed to Jenna's cheeks. How long had he been watching? Part of her wanted to be angry at his protective hovering, but a stronger part felt relieved. His presence alone made her feel safer, though she'd never admit it out loud. Reggie's eyes met hers, filled with fierce determination and concern. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The message was clear in his steady gaze. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her. Jenna paced back and forth in Reggie's small apartment, her hands running through her dark hair in frustration. The evening light filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Reggie sat at his kitchen table, his massive frame making the furniture look almost comically small. You need to take some time off, Reggie said, his deep voice firm but gentle. These cartel guys aren't playing around, Jenna. I've seen what they can do. She stopped pacing and turned to face him. I can't just walk away from this case. You don't understand. They're getting bolder. They're moving more product through the city than ever before. Her voice cracked slightly. Kids are dying from their drugs, Reggie. Teenagers. Reggie leaned forward, his tattooed arms resting on the table. I do understand. More than you know. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, please. Jenna hesitated, then slumped into the chair. Her badge caught the light as she moved, a reminder of the duty she couldn't ignore. Look, Reggie said, I've got connections on the street. People who owe me favors. People who see things. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Let me help you. We can work together on this. Smart and careful. Jenna's eyes narrowed. Your connections? You mean other hellsangels? Among others. Reggie's expression remained steady. I know you don't like it, but these people trust me. They'll talk to me about things they'd never tell a cop. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic outside. Jenna studied Reggie's face, the lines around his eyes, the small scar above his eyebrow, the sincerity in his expression. She thought about how he'd saved her life, how he'd shown her nothing but kindness and respect. It's too dangerous, she said finally. If anything happened to you because of me. Reggie let out a low chuckle. Dangerous is what I do best. He reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. I've got your back, Jenna, whether you like it or not. She looked down at their hands, feeling the roughness of his calluses against her skin. The touch was comforting, grounding. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. But we do this my way. No unnecessary risks. Reggie smiled. Deal. He stood up and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a worn leather notebook. First thing we need is intel. I know a guy who works at the docks. He sees everything that comes and goes. Jenna felt a flutter of hope in her chest. The docks? That's where we think they're bringing in their main shipments. They spent the next hour hunched over the kitchen table, Reggie sketching out a rough map of the harbor area while Jenna took notes. He knew every back alley, every warehouse, every potential hiding spot. His knowledge was impressive, and Jenna found herself becoming more confident in their unlikely partnership. We'll start with Miguel at the fish market, Reggie said, marking an X on the map. He owes me a favor, and he's got eyes everywhere. Jenna nodded, adding the name to her notes. When do we start? Tomorrow, early. Reggie's expression grew serious. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. She met his gaze steadily. I'm sure. I trust you, Reggie. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. They both knew how far they'd come from that first day when she'd woken up in his apartment, suspicious and afraid. Now they were planning an operation together, their fates intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted. Danny O'Connor's empty desk stood like a silent accusation in the precinct. His coffee mug, decorated with silly cat memes, sat cold and untouched. Jenna stared at his vacant chair, her heart heavy with worry. Just yesterday they'd been joking about his terrible taste in ties. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number showed a photo of Danny, bound and beaten in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. The message below read, "Back off, or he dies." Jenna's hands trembled as she dialed Reggie's number. Within minutes, his motorcycle roared into the parking lot behind the precinct. She met him there, away from prying eyes. "They've got Danny," she said, showing him the photo. "He's like a little brother to me, Reggie. I can't—" Her voice cracked. Reggie studied the image carefully, his expression darkening. "I know this place," he said. "It's one of their old distribution centers on the east side. Used to be a furniture warehouse. We need to get him out." Jenna tried to keep her voice steady, but fear crept in. "I should call for backup." "They'll kill him the moment they hear sirens," Reggie warned. "We need to do this quiet. Just you and me." Back at Reggie's apartment, they spread out maps across his kitchen table. Reggie's knowledge of the city's underbelly proved invaluable as he pointed out entry points and blind spots in the warehouse's security. "The cartel's got guards here, here, and here," he said, marking locations with red X's. "But there's a service entrance they don't watch as closely. Used to be how we'd slip past them when this was still Angel's territory." Jenna nodded, memorizing every detail. They gathered supplies, dark clothes, communication devices, and non-lethal weapons. Reggie insisted on bringing medical supplies, just in case. "Danny's tough," Jenna said, more to herself than to Reggie as she checked her gear. "He won't give up without a fight." "Neither will we," Reggie replied, his voice firm with conviction. As dusk settled over the city, they loaded their equipment into Reggie's old pickup truck. The familiar weight of her bulletproof vest felt both reassuring and suffocating. Reggie drove them through back alleys and side streets, avoiding main roads where they might be spotted. The warehouse loomed ahead, a dark mass against the purple sky. Reggie parked several blocks away, and they continued on foot. Years of police training kicked in as Jenna moved silently through the shadows, but she couldn't help noticing how naturally Reggie matched her movements. His massive frame somehow managed to stay just as stealthy. They paused behind a dumpster, the warehouse now just 50 yards away. Jenna could make out 2 guards at the main entrance, their cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the darkness. Her heart pounded against her ribs. "Second thoughts?" Reggie whispered, noticing her hesitation. "No," Jenna replied firmly. "Danny would do the same for me." Reggie touched her arm gently. "We're doing this together," he said, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering determination. Jenna nodded, drawing strength from his presence. Together they melted into the shadows, moving toward the service entrance and whatever waited for them inside. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Reggie led the way, his footsteps silent despite his size. Jenna followed close behind, her heart pounding against her ribs. The back entrance was exactly where Reggie said it would be, a rusty metal door partially hidden behind overgrown weeds. "Stay close," Reggie whispered, easing the door open with practiced care. The hinges creaked softly as they slipped inside. The air was thick with dust and the musty smell of rotting wood. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing stacks of old crates and broken furniture. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. They found Danny in a small office at the back of the warehouse. He was slumped in a chair, his hands bound behind him, his face bruised but conscious. His eyes widened when he saw them. "Jenna?" Danny's voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "Getting you out," she whispered, rushing to untie him while Reggie kept watch at the door. The zip ties were tight, cutting into Danny's wrists. Jenna's fingers fumbled with the plastic when a shout echoed through the warehouse. "Hey, who's there?" Footsteps thundered above them. A door slammed somewhere nearby. "We've got company," Reggie growled, drawing his weapon. The first shot came through the office window, shattering glass everywhere. Jenna felt a sharp burn across her arm as a bullet grazed her. She bit back a cry of pain and finally freed Danny's hands. "Move!" Reggie shouted, returning fire as shadows appeared in the doorway. They half-carried Danny between them, ducking behind crates as bullets splintered wood around them. The warehouse erupted into chaos, shouts and gunfire echoing off the high ceiling, their footsteps pounding on concrete. Reggie took point, leading them through a maze of storage areas. He knew the layout, guiding them toward an exit he'd spotted earlier. They were almost there when a figure stepped out from behind a column. The shot rang out before anyone could react. Reggie grunted, stumbling as blood bloomed on his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He fired back, forcing their attacker to retreat. "Keep going," he ordered through gritted teeth. They burst through an emergency exit into the cool night air. Jenna's arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed her, and Danny could barely walk, but they kept moving. Reggie brought up the rear, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of their getaway car, hidden 3 blocks away. Only then did they allow themselves to breathe. Danny collapsed into the back seat, while Jenna turned to Reggie, her eyes wide with concern. "You're hit bad," she said, reaching for his shoulder. Reggie caught her hand, his grip gentle despite the pain etched on his face. "We made it out alive," he said firmly. "That's what matters. You're both safe." Blood seeped between his fingers, but his eyes remained steady, locked with hers. In that moment, despite their injuries and the chaos they'd just escaped, Jenna felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude, and something else, something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. The soft glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across Reggie's apartment. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking each quiet moment as midnight approached. Reggie sat on his worn leather couch, his shoulder wrapped in fresh white bandages. Despite his attempts to hide it, pain flickered across his face with each small movement. Jenna paced the room, her hands trembling slightly as she remembered the events of the night. The rescue, the gunfire, the blood. It all played on repeat in her mind. She stopped and looked at Reggie, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "This is my fault," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You got hurt because of me. Because I dragged you into this mess." Reggie shook his head slowly, wincing as he adjusted his position on the couch. "Come here," he said, patting the space next to him. "Sit down before you wear a hole in my floor." Jenna hesitated, then sank down beside him. The leather creaked under her weight. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the antiseptic from his bandages, mixed with his familiar leather and pine scent. "Listen to me," Reggie said, his deep voice gentle, but firm. "We did what needed to be done. Danny's safe. The cartel's exposed. Their operation's gonna crumble now that we've blown their cover. But at what cost?" Jenna turned to face him, her professional facade cracking. "You could have died tonight." "But I didn't." Reggie reached out with his good arm and took her hand. His calloused fingers were warm against her skin. "We're both here. We're both alive." The touch of his hand sent a current through her body. Jenna looked down at their intertwined fingers, feeling the strength and gentleness in his grip. The walls she'd built around her heart were crumbling, and it terrified her. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted softly, her voice catching. "These feelings. I'm starting to care about you more than I should, Reggie. and that scares me." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, a reminder of the world they both belonged to, on opposite sides of the law. Reggie's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "I know," he said finally, "because I feel it too." He let out a long breath. "But we both know our worlds ain't simple. Your badge, my colors, they come with responsibilities, expectations." Jenna nodded, feeling the weight of truth in his words. "So what do we do? Right now?" Reggie's eyes met hers, warm and sincere. "We just be here, in this moment. Everything else, well, we'll figure it out as we go." They sat there in comfortable silence, their hands still joined, both aware of the complications that lay ahead, but choosing, for now, to find peace in each other's presence. The clock continued its steady ticking, marking time in a world that suddenly seemed both more complicated and more meaningful than before. The morning sun streamed through the apartment windows, casting warm patches of light across the wooden floor. Jenna sat at Reggie's kitchen table, clutching her phone tightly. Captain Miller's voice crackled through the speaker, firm and unyielding. "Walker, you need time off. That's not a suggestion. It's an order." His tone softened slightly. "You almost died last night. Both of you did." Jenna's free hand traced the edge of her coffee mug. "Sir, I can still help with the investigation. The cartel will be dealt with," Miller cut in. "But not by you. Not right now. Take a week, minimum. That's final." After hanging up, Jenna slumped in her chair. Reggie watched her from the couch, where he was doing his best to get comfortable with his injured shoulder. The bandages stood out stark white against his tattooed skin. "He's right, you know," Reggie said quietly. "You need rest." "I can't just sit around doing nothing," Jenna protested, but her voice lacked its usual fire. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the muzzle flashes, heard the crack of gunfire, felt the terror of nearly losing both Reggie and Danny. Reggie pushed himself up with a grunt and made his way to the kitchen. He pulled out the chair next to her and sat down, his presence solid and reassuring. "Sometimes doing nothing is the hardest thing," he said. "But it's necessary." Jenna looked at him, really looked at him. The tough exterior was still there, the tattoos, the scars, the hardened look that years of life had etched into his features. But now she saw beyond that. She saw the gentleness in his eyes, the way he carried himself with quiet dignity despite his pain. "I've never been good at stepping back," she admitted, "even when I should." Reggie reached out with his good arm and covered her hand with his. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Jenna. But even the strong need to heal." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and growing understanding. Jenna felt something shift in her chest, a wall crumbling that she'd built long ago. A sudden, heavy knock at the door made them both jump. Reggie's hand tightened briefly on hers before he stood up. He moved cautiously to the door, his injured shoulder making his movements stiff. When he opened it, the hallway was filled with leather-clad figures. Members of his hellsangels chapter stood shoulder to shoulder, their usual intimidating presence softened by the concern on their faces. Snake, the chapter president, stepped forward. "Heard what happened last night, Red," Snake said, his gruff voice carrying a note of pride. "You did good, brother. Real good." The others nodded in agreement, and someone called out, "Once a hero, always a hero." Jenna watched from the kitchen as the tough bikers surrounded Reggie, offering gentle pats on his good shoulder and words of support. The scene before her challenged everything she'd once believed about these men. In their rough-edged way, they were a family, and they took care of their own. Reggie stood among them, his usual stoic expression cracking slightly to reveal genuine emotion. For all his strength and independence, he wasn't alone. And somehow, watching this display of brotherhood, Jenna felt that maybe she wasn't either. The days following the rescue blended together in a gentle rhythm. Jenna found herself spending more time at Reggie's apartment, even though her own place was perfectly fine to return to. There was something about his presence that made her feel safe, grounded. One afternoon, they sat in his small kitchen, sharing a meal of homemade spaghetti that Reggie had surprisingly whipped up. "Never thought I'd see a Hell's Angel cooking pasta from scratch," Jenna teased, twirling the noodles around her fork. Reggie's laugh was deep and warm. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, making her heart skip. They fell into an easy routine. Mornings meant coffee on his balcony, watching the city wake up. Sometimes they talked about serious things, his time in the military, her struggles as a female cop. Other times they just sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching. During one of their afternoon walks through the park, Reggie opened up about his childhood. "My old man was tough," he said, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. "Military through and through. Probably why I enlisted. Trying to make him proud, you know?" Jenna nodded, understanding the weight of family expectations. She found herself sharing things, too. About growing up with a police officer father. About losing her partner 2 years ago in the line of duty. Things she rarely talked about with anyone. Their worlds, once so separate, began to intertwine. Reggie introduced her to some of his Hell's Angels brothers at a local diner. To her surprise, they were respectful, even friendly. She saw firsthand how they looked after local businesses, kept an eye on the elderly in their neighborhood. "We're not all bad guys," Reggie said one evening as they walked back from dinner. "Just different paths, different choices." Jenna reached for his hand, squeezing it. "I know that now." When Jenna finally returned to the station, she noticed the shift immediately. Officers who had once given her sideways glances now nodded with respect. The story of the rescue had spread, and with it, a new understanding of Reggie and what he stood for. In the break room, Officer Martinez approached her. "That boyfriend of yours," he said, the word boyfriend carrying no judgment. "He really came through for Danny. We owe him." Later that day, she overheard Captain Miller on the phone with someone from the Hell's Angels chapter. They were discussing coordinating efforts to keep the streets safe, sharing information about criminal activities. It was unprecedented, cops and bikers working together. "Times are changing," Sergeant Thompson remarked, catching her surprised expression. "Maybe it's about time we all learned to see past the labels." Jenna smiled, thinking of Reggie. She'd learned that lesson well over the past few days. As she sat at her desk, looking at the stack of paperwork about the cartel case, she felt stronger, knowing she wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. The wall between her world and Reggie's was slowly crumbling, brick by brick. The precinct buzzed with a new energy. An unusual alliance was forming, born from necessity and nurtured by understanding. Officers discussed patrol routes with leather-clad bikers in the parking lot, sharing intel and territory knowledge. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Jenna's phone buzzed at 3 a.m. She fumbled for it in the dark, her heart racing when she saw the caller ID. It was Martinez, one of her most reliable informants. "Detective Walker," she answered, already sitting up in bed. "They're making a move," Martinez whispered. "Big one. The cartel's bringing in a shipment worth millions. Thursday night down at the old paper mill." Jenna's fingers tightened around her phone. After weeks of dead ends, this could be the break they needed. "You're sure about this?" "100%. But, detective, they've got heavy security. Military-grade stuff." After getting the details, Jenna didn't hesitate. She threw on her jacket and headed straight to Reggie's apartment. The streets were empty, streetlights casting long shadows as she drove. Her knuckles barely touched his door before it swung open. "Couldn't sleep. Either?" Reggie asked, stepping aside to let her in. He was still fully dressed, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "I got a tip." Jenna paced his living room, energy coursing through her. The cartel's moving something big. Really big. Reggie listened intently as she laid out everything Martinez had told her. His expression grew serious when she mentioned the security detail. "Military-grade weapons," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "That changes things." They spent the next hour planning, cups of coffee growing cold on the coffee table. Reggie pulled out maps of the old paper mill, marking entry points and possible escape routes. His military training showed in every precise notation he made. "We'll need backup," Jenna said, chewing her lip. "But we have to be careful who we trust. The cartel's got eyes everywhere." Reggie nodded, then hesitated. "I might know some guys, former military, like me. They ride with the angels now, but they're solid. They'd help." Jenna looked at him, studying his face. A few months ago, the idea of working with bikers would have been unthinkable. Now, she trusted Reggie with her life. "Make the calls," she said. They worked through the morning, gathering resources and making plans. Reggie reached out to his contacts while Jenna carefully selected a small team of officers she knew she could trust completely. By noon, they had assembled in a private room at the back of a diner owned by one of Reggie's friends. The unlikely group, 4 police officers and 3 bikers, sat around a table, reviewing the plan. "This isn't just another bust," Jenna told them, her voice firm. "This is our chance to take down the entire operation, but it has to be perfect." Reggie stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "We've got one shot at this," he added. "Everyone needs to be clear on their role." As they went over the details again, Jenna felt the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just about taking down criminals anymore. It was about proving that barriers could be broken, that trust could bridge even the widest gaps. When the meeting ended and the others filed out, Reggie caught Jenna's arm. His touch was gentle, but she could feel the strength in his fingers. "You're something else, you know that?" he said softly. "What you've done here, bringing these 2 worlds together. I'm proud of you, Jenna." The words hit her hard, making her throat tight. She looked up at him, saw the warmth in his eyes, felt the electricity between them that had been building for weeks. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and possibilities. Tomorrow, they would face one of the biggest challenges of their lives. But right now, in this quiet moment, Jenna felt more alive than she had in years. The old paper mill loomed against the night sky, its rusty walls a testament to decades of abandonment. Jenna crouched behind a stack of wooden crates, her bulletproof vest tight against her chest. Next to her, Reggie's massive frame cast a shadow in the dim light of the moon. "Remember?" she whispered. "We wait for my signal." Around them, 24 officers positioned themselves strategically, their weapons at the ready. Reggie nodded, his face set in grim determination. "Just like we planned," he said softly. His leather jacket had been replaced with tactical gear, but the strength in his eyes remained unchanged. Through her earpiece, Jenna heard the confirmation she'd been waiting for. "Team's in position." She took a deep breath and raised her hand. "Move in. Now!" The night exploded into chaos. Flashbangs lit up the darkness as officers stormed the building from multiple entry points. The cartel members reacted instantly, and the air filled with gunfire. Jenna and Reggie moved as one, covering each other as they advanced through the mill's main floor. Years of police training merged seamlessly with Reggie's street experience. When a cartel member emerged from behind a column, Reggie tackled him before he could aim his weapon. When another tried to flank them, Jenna dropped him with a precise shot to the leg. "Watch your 6!" Reggie shouted, pulling Jenna behind a concrete barrier as bullets peppered their position. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. They pushed forward, room by room, corridor by corridor. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest, but her hands remained steady. Reggie stayed close, his presence both reassuring and protective. "Second floor clear," came a shout through her radio. "Basement secure." They were winning. The cartel members were being rounded up one by one. But then Jenna spotted movement above. A sniper in the rafters, his rifle trained on her team below. "Up high!" she yelled, but her warning came a second too late. Reggie saw the threat at the same moment. Without hesitation, he launched himself at Jenna, knocking her aside as the shot rang out. They tumbled behind a large piece of machinery, but Jenna heard Reggie's sharp intake of breath. "Red!" she called out, using his nickname for the first time. Blood was spreading across his right shoulder. "I'm fine," he grunted, though his face had gone pale. "Don't stop now." The sniper's position was exposed. Jenna didn't hesitate. She lined up her shot and squeezed the trigger. The man fell with a cry, his rifle clattering to the ground below. "Suspect down!" she radioed. "Officer needs medical assistance!" All around them, the shooting was dying down. Officers called out, "Clear!" from different sections of the building. The raid was successful. They'd caught the entire operation. Jenna pressed her hands against Reggie's wound, trying to stem the bleeding. His breathing was labored, but his eyes remained focused on her face. "Looks like I owed you one anyway." He managed a weak smile. "Just stay with me," Jenna said firmly, hearing sirens in the distance. She held him close, supporting his head in her lap. "Help is coming." Around them, officers secured the scene and cuffed the surviving cartel members. The operation that had terrorized their city for months was finally over. But right now, all Jenna could think about was the man in her arms, the unlikely hero who'd risked everything to protect her. "We did it," Reggie whispered, his hand finding hers. "We really did it." Jenna squeezed his hand, relief flooding through her as she heard the paramedics rushing in. "Yes, we did. Together." The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beeping of monitors. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm patches across Reggie's bed. His broad frame seemed somehow smaller against the stark white sheets, his usual commanding presence softened by the hospital gown and bandages wrapped around his shoulder. Jenna sat in the chair beside him, her fingers absently playing with the hem of her jacket. She'd been here every day since the raid, watching over him during her off-duty hours. The smell of antiseptic and flowers from well-wishers filled the air. "You don't have to stay, you know," Reggie said, his voice gruff but gentle. "I'm sure you've got better things to do than watch me sleep." Jenna shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Not really. The paperwork can wait." She reached out and adjusted his pillow, her hand lingering near his shoulder. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't try to escape." "Me? Never?" Reggie's attempt at innocence was betrayed by the mischievous glint in his eyes. "Though I got to admit, these four walls are starting to close in a bit." Jenna watched as he shifted uncomfortably in the bed, trying to hide a wince. Her heart clenched at the sight. The bullet had come so close to his heart, just a few inches difference, and she might have lost him forever. The thought made her stomach twist. "Hey," Reggie said softly, catching her expression. "I can hear you thinking from here. What's going on in that head of yours?" Jenna stood up and walked to the window, crossing her arms across her chest. "You could have died, Reggie. If that bullet had been just a little bit to the left." But it wasn't. His voice was firm, grounding. "This time," she said, turning back to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What about next time? Or the time after that? This whole thing between us, whatever it is, it's complicated enough already." Reggie pushed himself up straighter in the bed, ignoring the obvious discomfort the movement caused. "Come here," he said, patting the edge of the bed. Jenna hesitated for a moment before sitting down beside him. The mattress dipped under their combined weight, bringing them closer together. "Look at me," he said. When she did, his eyes were serious. "I've been shot at before. Been through worse, actually. But this time it meant something. Because I was protecting something worth protecting." Jenna felt her throat tighten. "I'm scared, Reggie," she admitted. "Not just of losing. You! I'm scared of what this means, of how much I—" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Reggie reached out with his good arm and took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, calloused, but gentle. "I know. Truth is, I'm a little scared too. Never thought I'd be here, feeling like this about a cop." He squeezed her hand. "But whatever comes next, we'll face it together." "You make it sound so simple," Jenna said, managing a weak laugh. "Nothing simple about it," Reggie replied. "But some things are worth the complexity." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and growing understanding. Outside, the afternoon sun painted the hospital room in shades of gold, and the steady beeping of the monitors continued their reassuring rhythm. The morning headlines blazed across every local newspaper and news website. Hell's Angel hero saves officer in cartel takedown. Jenna's phone buzzed constantly with notifications as the story spread through social media. At her desk in the precinct, she tried to focus on her paperwork, but the whispers and glances from her fellow officers made it impossible. Officer Martinez stopped by her desk, coffee in hand. "You're quite the celebrity now, Walker." He grinned, sliding the morning paper across her desk. "Never thought I'd see the day when we'd be praising a Hell's Angel." Jenna picked up the paper, studying the grainy photo of Reggie from his military days, alongside a more recent shot of him in his leather vest. The contrast was striking, yet both images captured the same determination in his eyes. "He's more than just a Hell's Angel," she said quietly. Throughout the morning, more colleagues dropped by her desk. Some offered congratulations on the successful raid, while others seemed more interested in gossiping about her connection with Reggie. The reactions varied from genuine support to barely concealed disapproval. During lunch break, Jenna retreated to the quiet of the evidence room, seeking refuge from the constant attention. Captain Reynolds found her there, sorting through case files. "Walker," he said, his voice softer than usual. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, sir. Just trying to keep busy." The captain leaned against a filing cabinet. "You know, when I first heard about Jackson helping you, I thought it was a mistake. But sometimes the best allies come from unexpected places." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The department's official stance is supportive. Your partnership with Jackson helped bring down one of the biggest cartels in the city." Jenna nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you, sir." As she left the evidence room, she overheard two rookie officers discussing her situation in the break room. "Can you believe it? Walker and a biker?" one whispered. "I heard he's actually a war hero," the other responded. "My cousin served with him overseas. Says he was one of the best soldiers in their unit." The afternoon brought a fresh wave of media, requests all of which Jenna politely declined. Local news vans parked outside the precinct, hoping to catch a glimpse of the officer who had bridged the gap between law enforcement and the Hell's Angels. At her desk, Jenna's phone lit up with a text message from Reggie. "Doctors say I'm healing well. Miss your visits. Can't wait to see you again." Her heart warmed at his words, but a mix of emotions stirred inside her. Their relationship, whatever it was becoming, would face scrutiny from both sides, her world of law enforcement and his world of bikers. Yet, as she typed her reply, she realized she didn't care about the whispers anymore. "Miss you too. I'll bring your favorite coffee tomorrow," she texted back, a small smile playing on her lips. Officer Chen appeared at her desk with a stack of case files. "The media's been calling nonstop," she said. "Everyone wants to know about you and Jackson, but don't worry, we're running interference." Jenna appreciated the support from colleagues like Chen, who saw beyond the surface and understood that sometimes life's most meaningful connections defied conventional boundaries. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Reggie's front yard when the first police cruiser pulled up. Reggie was resting on his couch, still recovering from his injuries, when he heard the distinctive sound of multiple engines approaching. His muscles tensed instinctively. Years of being on the wrong side of the law had taught him to be wary. A firm knock echoed through his small house. Reggie pushed himself up carefully, mindful of his healing wounds, and made his way to the door. When he opened it, his eyes widened in disbelief. Police cars lined his street as far as he could see. Officers, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, stood in formation on his front lawn and spilled onto the sidewalk. At the front stood Captain Reynolds, the department chief, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "Mr. Jackson," the captain said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet street. "We're here to thank you." Jenna stood near her patrol car at the back of the crowd, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold. She saw Reggie's broad shoulders tense, then slowly relax as he took in the sea of blue uniforms before him. One by one, officers stepped forward to shake his hand. Some shared stories of their own experiences, Others simply offered quiet words of gratitude. A young rookie officer, tears in her eyes, told him how her brother was also a veteran struggling to find his place. An older sergeant spoke about how the partnership between Reggie and Jenna had changed his perspective on redemption. The crowd continued to grow as more officers arrived. They brought coffee, donuts, and handmade thank you cards from their children. Someone started a collection for Reggie's medical bills, and the hat was quickly filled with donations. Reggie stood on his porch, accepting each gesture with humility. His usual tough exterior softened as he listened to story after story. Despite his imposing figure and the Hell's Angels vest he still wore, he looked more approachable than ever. From her position at the back, Jenna watched as barriers crumbled. Officers who had once crossed the street at the sight of a biker now embraced Reggie like a brother. The man who had saved her life was being recognized not for his past, but for who he truly was: a protector, a hero, a man of honor. A small group of veterans in police uniform approached Reggie, recognizing the subtle signs of military bearing in his stance. They exchanged quiet words, and Jenna saw Reggie's eyes grow misty as they rendered him a respectful salute. The afternoon light began to fade, but the stream of grateful officers continued. Each handshake, each word of thanks, seemed to lift a weight from Reggie's shoulders. The man who had lived so long in society's shadows was finally stepping into the light. Jenna felt tears welling up in her eyes as she witnessed the transformation taking place. The divide between law enforcement and the man they had once considered an outlaw was dissolving before her eyes. In its place, a new understanding was forming, one based on respect, gratitude, and the recognition that heroes sometimes came from unexpected places. She watched as Reggie received yet another handshake, another pat on the back, another word of thanks. The tough biker who had saved her life was now being embraced by the very system that had once rejected him. The city's guardians had come to honor one of their own, even if he wore leather instead of blue. The evening settled over the city like a soft blanket, bringing with it a peaceful quiet that seemed to wrap around Reggie's small house. Inside, Reggie sat on his worn leather couch, his shoulder still tender from the healing wound. Jenna perched beside him, closer than she would have dared just weeks ago. "I still can't believe all those officers showed up today," Reggie said, shaking his head. His voice was gruff, but held a note of wonder. "Never thought I'd see the day when cops would be thanking me for anything." Jenna smiled, reaching over to touch his arm. "You earned their respect, Reggie. You earned mine too, though I fought it pretty hard at first." The space between them felt different now, comfortable, like coming home after a long journey. The walls that had once separated them, cop and biker, law and outlaw, had crumbled away, leaving something real and honest in their place. "Remember when you first woke up here?" Reggie asked, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You looked at me like I was going to eat you alive." Jenna laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Can you blame me? You were this huge, tattooed Hell's Angel hovering over me. I thought I was in serious trouble." "And now?" His eyes met hers, steady and sure. "Now?" Jenna paused, considering. "Now I feel like I can finally breathe, like I don't have to be Officer Walker all the time. I can just be me." Reggie shifted on the couch, turning to face her more fully. The movement made him wince slightly, but he didn't pull back. "You know, for years I felt like I was living in between worlds. Too broken for civilian life after the war. Too straight-laced deep down to fully embrace the outlaw life. But with you," he trailed off, searching for the right words. "With me?" Jenna prompted softly. "With you, I don't feel caught between anymore. I feel like I finally know where I belong." Jenna's eyes misted over as she reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd been doing it for years. The rough calluses of his palm felt familiar now, comforting. "I've never felt more alive," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. All those years on the force, I thought I knew what it meant to really live, to make a difference. But this, us, it's something else entirely. Reggie squeezed her hand gently. We make quite a pair, don't we? The cop and the biker. Ex-biker, Jenna corrected with a small smile. Ex-biker, he agreed, nodding. Though I might keep the jacket. It looks good on me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the future stretching out before them like an open road. Neither knew exactly where it would lead, but for the first time in both their lives, that uncertainty didn't feel threatening. Instead, it felt like possibility. So what happens now? Jenna asked, her head resting against his good shoulder. I don't know, Reggie answered honestly, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together. The city lights twinkled outside the window, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder of the world they both came from. But here, in this moment, they had found something neither expected. A place where both their worlds could exist together, where the lines between right and wrong weren't so stark, and where two people from opposite sides of the law could build something real and lasting. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Reggie's motorcycle wound its way up the winding road. Jenna held tight to his waist, her cheek pressed against his leather jacket. They'd been riding for almost an hour, leaving the city's chaos far behind them. Finally, Reggie pulled off onto a narrow dirt path that led to a clearing overlooking the valley. The city sprawled out below them, its lights just beginning to twinkle in the late afternoon sun. He cut the engine, and the peaceful silence of nature enveloped them. I used to come here a lot after I came back from the war, Reggie said, helping Jenna off the bike. It helped clear my head when things got too noisy inside. Jenna walked to the edge of the clearing, taking in the view. It's beautiful up here. She wrapped her arms around herself, protection against the cool air. Without a word, Reggie shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. They settled on a fallen log, shoulders touching. The jacket smelled like leather and motor oil, but also like Reggie, a scent that had become oddly comforting to Jenna over the past weeks. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Jenna said, breaking the comfortable silence. About my job, about everything that's happened. She turned to look at him, her eyes clear and determined. I'm transferring to community policing. Reggie raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. Being with you, seeing how you work with people in the neighborhood, it's opened my eyes. We need more officers who understand the community, who see people as people, not just potential criminals. She took a deep breath. The drug unit, it's important work, but I think I can do more good elsewhere. The community policing division? Reggie nodded slowly. Yeah, I can see that. You've got away with people when you're not trying to arrest them. His eyes crinkled with amusement. Jenna laughed, nudging him with her shoulder. Very funny, but seriously, everything that's happened, meeting you, seeing how you protect people in your own way, it's changed how I look at things. Maybe if we had more officers working with the community instead of against it. You're gonna make a difference, Reggie said softly. You already have. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A hawk circled lazily overhead, riding the thermal currents. What about you? Jenna asked. What's next for the infamous Big Red? Reggie chuckled. Think I might focus more on the veteran outreach program. Too many guys coming back with nowhere to go, no one to talk to who understands. He paused. Besides, someone's got to keep an eye on this new community police officer I heard about. The light was fading now, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Reggie stood, offering his hand to help Jenna up. We should head back before it gets too dark. As they walked back to the motorcycle, Jenna's hand found his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd been doing this for years instead of moments. No words were needed. They both knew this was just the beginning of something new. The community center buzzed with excitement as people filed into the large assembly hall. Streamers in blue and gold decorated the walls, and a banner reading Heroes Among Us stretched across the stage. The room was packed with an unusual mix. Police officers in their dress blues mingled with leather-clad bikers, while local politicians and community members filled the remaining seats. Reggie shifted uncomfortably in his pressed shirt and tie, a stark departure from his usual attire. Jenna, standing beside him in her formal police uniform, gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You clean up pretty nice, Big Red," she whispered, smoothing a wrinkle from his sleeve. The police chief approached the podium, his voice filling the hall. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be standing here honoring a member of the hellsangels alongside one of our finest officers, I wouldn't have believed it. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. But sometimes the greatest heroes come from unexpected places. As the chief recounted the events that had brought them all together, the shooting, the rescue, the takedown of the cartel, Jenna watched Reggie's face. His expression remained stoic, but she could see the emotion in his eyes. His fellow bikers sat in the front row, their usual intimidating presence softened by proud smiles. Mrs. Martinez, the owner of the local bakery, stood up to speak next. "Before all this happened, I used to cross the street when I saw Mr. Jackson coming," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Now, he helps my grandson with his homework every Thursday at the community center. He's shown us all that you can't judge a book by its cover." More community members shared stories, how Reggie had started a veterans support group, how he and Jenna together had implemented new community policing initiatives. The tough biker and the dedicated cop had become bridges between worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. When it was their turn to speak, Reggie stepped up first, his large frame making the podium look small. "I'm not good at speeches," he said gruffly. "But I want to thank you all for giving me a chance to be more than what you first saw." His eyes found Jenna's in the crowd. "Sometimes it takes someone believing in you before you can believe in yourself." Jenna joined him at the podium, her shoulder brushing against his arm. 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who the good guys and bad guys were," she said. "I was wrong. Sometimes the lines we draw between people are nothing but shadows. They disappear when you shine a light on them." After the ceremony, as people mingled over coffee and cake, Jenna and Reggie slipped outside to the community center's garden. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. They stood together hand in hand, watching the horizon. Reggie's calloused fingers intertwined with Jenna's, a perfect fit despite their differences. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The warmth of their joined hands said everything that needed saying. In that moment under the painted sky, they were no longer the cop and the biker, the unlikely heroes, or even the talk of the town. They were simply Jenna and Reggie, two people who had found something real and true in each other.